think we can start now. So, who will read? Pallavi?
Shall I read? Yes,
Yeah,
shall I read?
yeah, read that. Okay. Small para.
From the from the
Yeah.
beginning of the Gita, this characteristic temperament of the disciple is clearly indicated, and it is maintained throughout. It becomes first evident in the manner in which he is awakened to the sense of what he is doing, the great slaughter of which is to be the chief instrument. In thoughts, in the thoughts which immediately rise in him, in the standpoint and the psychological motives which make him recoil from the whole terrible catastrophe. They are not the thoughts, the standpoint, the motives of the physical, of a philosophical or even of a deeply reflective mind or a spiritual temperament confronted with the same or a similar problem. They are those, as we might say, of the practical or the pragmatic man, the emotional, sensational, moral, and intelligent human being not habituated to profound and original reflection or any sounding of the depths, accustomed rather to high but fixed standards of thought and action, and a confident treading through all vicissitudes and difficulties, who now finds all his standards failing him and all the basis of his confidence in himself and his life shone away from under him at a single stroke. That is the nature of the crisis which he undergoes.
I think we have read it. But anyway,
Ranga,
it doesn't matter. We can,
Ranga,
yeah.
uh, we have finished this paragraph and the next one also. We have to start from
Ah,
up.
okay. Yeah. So, all right, we'll do that. So just remind you of what he's saying in the para because there was some. Arjuna is an ordinary man ready for the spiritual life. He is not absolutely an ordinary man. He is now ready for the for the spiritual life. But he lives in the vital and the mental. In the vital, Swami is very clear, emotional sensation, moral and intelligent in the mind, okay, but he is not above the mind. He is not used to profound and original reflection. Then he would have seen that he has to obey Sri Krishna, but he does not, he cannot, because he is living in the body mind life, okay. So his reaction is very ordinary. It's a reaction of the vital which recoils from a very terrible work. Okay, I think I mentioned also once that the nervousness in the lower vital is most often it is there in everybody. Okay, and it is often compared to compassion. Okay, you can't bear to see very cruel things. Okay, there are some people who can't very in fact that's the reason why nowadays in videos and all that they warn you, they tell you that's the reason because people can get very upset. So it is there are scenes which may be objectionable, so be careful. Don't let children see, they warn you precisely because the lower vital is sensitive in a negative way. It cannot bear too strong and an event. Okay, it can be a bloody murder. It can be something like that. Very strong thing you can't. So Arjuna's reaction is exactly that. He's saying impossible for me to kill my own people. Then, so that's it. He is an ordinary man. That's what Srimati is saying in the paragraph. Now, Achana is saying we have read the other one also, but I will quickly read through and we will summarize and then go on to the next. Okay, so we'll read from it is typical. But since there is a little doubt, we will read. I am reading this one so that it can go fast. Arjuna is, in the language of the Gita, a man subject to the action of the three gunas or modes of the nature force and habituated to move unquestioningly in that field. It is so clear in the language of the Gita. Man subject to the action of the three gunas. That means you are identified with your body, your vital, and your mind. The guna in the body, when you are identified, it is tamas. When you are identified with the vital, whether upper or lower, there is an upper vital and a lower vital. That is your rajas. And finally, when you are identified with the mind, it is sattva. So he is ready. Even his sattvic qualities are there, but he recoils. And nature force is prakriti. Prakriti in you, in the individual, is the body, mind, life. Okay. So you are subject to your body, mind, life. That's what Sri Aurobindo says. And habituated to move unquestioningly. He does not think deeply. So he is thinking, he agrees to whatever are the laws that he has to follow when he is in the ignorance. That's what Sri Aurobindo is saying. Like the generality of men. He justifies his name only in being so far. Yeah, we have read this also, I remember.
Yes.
I said, Arjuna, the meaning is white, clear, bright color of the day.
Yes.
Okay, that's
Yes.
what it. Yeah, he's right. So he justifies his name in only in being so far pure and sattvic as to be governed by high and clear principles. He is a Kshatriya and he has got very clear principles. The principles of the Kshatriya is governance, purity, protection of the weak, okay, and the moral right. That's the Kshatriya. And impulses and habitually control his lower nature by the noblest law that he names, that he knows. The noblest law for him is the Kshatriya. You have to do the right. Okay, you have to protect the weak. That's the law of the Kshatriya. He is not of a violent asuric disposition, not the slave of his passions. Not the slave of his passions means he is more sattvic than rajasic, but has been trained to a high calm and self-control, to an unswerving performance of his duties and firm obedience to the best principles of the time and society in which he has lived and the religion and ethics to which he has been brought up. Okay, dharma, okay? Dharma of the Kshatriya. He is egoistic like other men, but with the, if he, that also is, what is the implication? He is egoistic like other men, he lives in the body-mind life. That's the equivalent. Okay? If you don't live in the body-mind life, you can't, the ego disappears. So he is egoistic like other men, but with the purer or sattvic egoism, which regards the moral law and society and the claims of others, and not only or predominantly his own interests, desires and passions. He can live for others. He can protect the others, not protect only himself. He has lived and guided himself by the Shastra, the moral and social code, the thought which preoccupies him, the standard which he obeys is the dharma. That's right. The word dharma also we discussed. The root is dhri. Okay, many people say dharma is religion, dharma is duty. It is not that. It is to hang on to the law which is relevant to the level at which you are. Okay. If you are in the physical world, your dharma is the maintenance of the family, earning a living, taking responsibility for your children. That is the dharma of the ordinary man. The dharma of the artist is to try and find beauty. The dharma of the religious man is to try and live his life according to higher principles. Okay, so dharma meaning goes on changing according to, but basic meaning is living by the laws at which level you are. Okay, dharma. That collective Indian conception of the note, religious, social, and moral rule of conduct, and especially the rule of the station and function to which he belongs. Certainly so clear. If you belong to the station, you have to obey the laws of that particular level. Okay? Physical, vital, mental, spiritual. He, the Kshatriya, the high-minded, self-governed, chivalrous prince and warrior and leader of Aryan men. So he has to obey the Kshatriya law, the Kshatriya dharma. Following always this rule, conscious of virtue and right dealing, he has travelled so far and finds suddenly it has led him to become the protagonist of a terrific and unparalleled slaughter, a monstrous evil civil war. Sorry, evil civil war is right. A monstrous civil war involving all the cultured Aryan nations, which must lead to the complete destruction of the flower of their manhood and threaten that ordered civilization with chaos and collapse. The Gita is very clear. It says that when there is destruction of the society, the social dharmas also go, and it goes very far. It says then the women also get corrupted, and there is there's a confusion at the social level. That's what the Gita says. So, in fact, you can see that happening in the West now. Everything has collapsed and they are all at the physical level, and there's so much of chaos there, even at the level that the Gita mentions. So this is what he's saying. Now we go to what we have not read today. So somebody, okay,
I'll read.
yeah,
Today I
read.
can read, Rangadhar.
Okay, read. It is typical again.
It is typical again of the pragmatic man that it is through his sensations that he awakens to the meaning of his action. He has asked his friend and charioteer to place him between the two armies, not with any profounder idea, but with the proud intention of viewing and looking in the face those myriads of the champions of unrighteousness whom he has to meet and conquer and slay in this holiday of fight, so that the right may prevail. It is as he gazes that the revelation of the meaning of a civil and domestic war comes home to him. A war in which not only men of the same race, the same nation, the same clan, but those of the same family and household stand upon opposite sides. All whom the social man holds most dear and sacred, he must meet as enemies and slay. The worshipped teacher and preceptor, the old friend, comrade, and companion in arms, grandsires, uncles, those who stood in the relation to him of father, of son, of grandson, connections by bloody and connections by marriage, connections by blood and connections by marriage. All these social ties have to be cut asunder by the sword. It is not that he did not know these things before, but he has never realized it all. Just by his claims and wrongs and by the principles of his life, the struggle for the right, the duty of the Kshatriya to protect justice and the law and fight and beat down injustice and lawless violence, he has never thought it out deeply, nor felt it in his heart and at the core of his life. And now it is shown to his vision by the divine charioteer, placed sensationally before his eyes and comes home to him like a blow delivered at the very center of his sensational, vital, and emotional being.
Okay, so interesting para. We'll look at what he's saying. Okay. It is typical again of the pragmatic man. He is he is living in the physical world. He is a very normal, practical man. That it is through his sensations that he awakens to the meaning of his action. Note, through his sensations, not the mind. The thinker, the sattvic man acts through his thoughts. He evaluates everything with his mind. But Arjuna is not the thinker. He has told you very clearly. So, although he is sattvic, part of his being is sattvic, but he is a practical man. So, his attitude to the world will be decided by the vital sensations and the physical sensations that he sees. So clear, sir, they is saying. It is typical again of the pragmatic man that it is through his sensations that he awakens to the meaning of the action, not through thought. Okay. He has asked his friend and charioteer. What Sremda is saying very clearly, because at that time when he is asking, his friend and charioteer is Arjuna. Okay, he is a friend and charioteer. To place him between the two armies, and here again Sremda is saying something very interesting. Not with the profounder idea, but with the proud intention of viewing and looking in the face these myriads of the champions of unrighteousness, the Kauravas, okay, the champions of unrighteousness, okay, whom he has to meet and conquer and slay. And then he's putting in inverted commas in this holiday of a fight. Now, I had a huge problem with this holiday of a fight. How the hell is Sremdo getting this holiday? He's also putting in inverted commas. What does it mean? So for a long time I did not understand. I asked many people also. Nobody could explain to me how because what are the Sanskrit words? Dharma kshetre, kurukshetre, samaveta, yuyutsavaha. Those eager for battle. Yuyutsavaha. Okay? Those who are eager for battle. Now, Srimdi is translating holiday of fight. In Sanskrit, there is no intention of holiday anywhere at all in the original. But then finally, one day I stumbled upon other places where Srimdi is explaining what he means. Okay, he is saying the intention and the character of the Kshatriya is to enjoy what he is doing. A very brave man enjoys the challenge of a war. He actually enjoys it. So it's like a holiday for him. That is what is meant. So he is not afraid of, he wants to enjoy what he has to do. The enjoyment of whatever we have to do is very important. It's a very interesting thing. Those who are Shudras should enjoy the work they're doing. Okay. Even when you have to sweep the floor, if you take enjoyment, the quality of the action completely changes. Okay. An artist automatically enjoys what he's doing. Okay. That is because he is creating. And a thinker also, when he is reading text, which is understands, and when he understands the text, there is enjoyment. So a Kshatriya should enjoy his profession, his work of war. He is a hero and he should not be afraid. Okay, that is what Sremda is meaning by holiday of a fight. Okay.
But why is it under between parentheses? I mean,
Precisely because it's not there in the Sanskrit.
okay.
You have to understand in a different way. Okay. In there it is Yuyutsava, eager for battle. So Sremda is extending the meaning of Yuyutsava, eager for battle. Okay. Yuddha, Yuyutsava, those who are eager for battle. So in this holiday of a fight. For Arjuna, he is wanting to see what he has to do and he is going to enjoy it. But suddenly when he sees all his uncles and grandsons, Sremda has given a big description. We'll read that. Okay. Then his nerves fail him because he has told you earlier that his reactions to the world is through his sensations, not the mind. So that's what happens. Okay. So that the right may prevail. He tells him to take in the middle of the battlefield, and that was his symbolic. You should be in the thick of the world to be able to realize what you have to do. Okay? So if you withdraw yourself from the world, you may not know what you should do. Okay, this is a conclusion. But this is so interesting. Even the image of take me to the center between the two armies. Okay, between the good and the evil, between the two extremes, between the dualities. Let me see. So that also is so clearly symbolic. So that the right may prevail. It is as he gazes upon the revelation of the meaning of a civil and domestic war, comes home to me. Now note the word domestic war. India has never been politically one, but culturally, religiously, it has always been one, culturally. Always, right from Kanyakumari to Kashmir, all the things, all the religions, all the festivals are all common, but with a different meaning. Okay, so it's interesting. Yeah. Deepavali, Durga Puja, okay, Dashera, all these things are all interconnected and we share the same day also, but with a slightly different meaning. So India has never been politically one. That's why civil war. All the nations are civil war. It's not a war between. So it is. When he uses a civil war, it means culturally one nation. Na? So it's interesting what he's saying. Meaning of civil war and domestic war comes home to him. A war in which not only men of the same race, the same nation, the same clan, but those of the same family and household stand upon opposite sides. And he is listing them. All whom the social man holds most dear and sacred, he must meet as enemies and slay. The worshipped teacher. Now, who is the worshipped teacher, remember? And
Drona.
Dronacharya, that's right. The old friend. Who is the old friend? Comrade and companion in arms. Okay. In fact, his own Karna also his own brother, but he doesn't know he's his brother. Okay. Grandsires. Who is the grandsire?
Bhishma.
Yeah, Bhishma.
Bhishma Pitama.
Yeah, Bhishma Pita. Uncles. Okay, there are many uncles. I've forgotten the names, but those who stood in the relation to him of father, of son, of grandson, connections by blood and connections by marriage. All these social ties have to be cut asunder by the soul. This is what he realizes through his sensation, not through the mind. It is not that he did not know these things before, but he has never realized it all. Obsessed by his claims and wrongs and by the principles of his life, the struggle for the right, the duty of the Kshatriya, to protect justice and the law and fight and beat down injustice and lawless violence, he has neither thought out deeply nor felt it in his heart and at the core of his life. And now it is shown to his vision by the divine charioteer, placed sensationally before his eyes, and comes home to him like a blow, delivered at the very center of his sensational, vital, and emotional being. Look how Srimad is going on saying sensational, sensational, not mental. Okay, it says vital that is reacting to this thing. And now Sri Krishna will tell him, don't react vitally, react from the mental level or even above the mental level. Raise yourself to a higher pitch, and your laws and your ideas will change. That's what he said. Okay? Very clear how Srimad is analyzing. That's why people find the essays on the Gita absolutely marvelous. The best commentary among the Indian commentaries. In fact, everybody has commented on the Gita, right from Shankaracharya to all the other saints in Maharashtra and even modern day, even Bal Gangadhar Tilak. He has also commented on the Gita. Even in the ashram, 5 people have commented on the Gita. So it is so important, the book. Okay, we go to the next one. The first result. Archana did read, so who reads the next one?
Do
Yasmin
you
is,
want me?
yes, Yasmin, you can read.
Okay.
Sunki read Saturday, so we can read. Yes, we can. The first result. Yeah.
The first result is a violent, sensational, and physical crisis which produces a disgust of the action and its material objects and of life itself. He rejects the vital aim pursued by egoistic humanity in its action, happiness and enjoyment. He rejects the vital aim of the Kshatriya, victory and rule and power and the government of men. What, after all, is this fight for justice when reduced to its practical terms? But just this, a fight for the interest of himself, his brothers, and his party, for possession and enjoyment and rule. But at such a cost, these things are not worth having, for they are of no value in themselves, but only as a means to the righteous maintenance of social and national life. And it is these very aims that, in the person of his kin and his race, he is about to destroy. And then comes the cry of his race, he is about to destroy. Sorry, and then comes the cry of the emotions.
That's right.
These are they for whose sake life and happiness are desired for our own people. Who would consent to slay these for the sake of all the earth, or even for the kingdom of the 3 worlds? What pleasure can there be in a life? What happiness? What satisfaction in oneself after such a deed? The whole thing is a dreadful sin. For now, the moral sense awakens to justify the revolt of the sensations and the emotions. It is a sin. There is no right nor justice in mutual slaughter. Especially are those who are to be slain the natural objects of reverence and of love, who those without whom one would not care to live. And to violate these sacred feelings can be no virtue, can be nothing but a heinous crime. Granted that the offense, the aggression, the first sin, the crimes of greed and selfish passion, which have brought things to such a pass, came from the other side. Yet armed resistance to wrong under such circumstances would be itself a sin and crime worse than theirs because they are blinded by passion and unconscious of guilt. While on this side, it would be with a clear sense of guilt that the sin would be committed. And for what? For the maintenance of family morality, of the social law and the law of the nation? These are the very standards that will be destroyed by this civil war. The family itself will be brought to the point of annihilation. Corruption of morals and loss of the purity of race will be endangered. The eternal laws of the race and moral law of the family will be destroyed. Ruin of the race, the collapse of its high traditions, ethical degradation, and hell for the authors of such a crime. These are the only practical results possible of this momentous civil strife. Therefore, cries Arjuna, casting down the divine bow, an inexhaustible quiver given to him by the gods for that tremendous hour. It is more for my welfare that the sons of Dhritarashtra, armed, should slay me unarmed and unresisting. I will not fight.
Yeah, I will not fight. So he has given up his Kshatriyahood. He has given up his Kshatriyahood. So this is the crisis that he faces in life. Very interesting para. We'll have a look at the long one page, but we'll have a look. There are many things to be discussed here. It's very interesting if you go a little into depth. The basic idea is very clear. He sees that he has to kill his own grandsons, his grandparents, his pitamaha. He has to kill his uncles and whatnot, his cousins. Kauravas are all his cousins and in a sense companions. So he has to kill them all. Impossible. I can't do it. You see? Violent, sensational, physical crisis. Okay, physical crisis, which produces a disgust of the action and its material objects and of life itself. Now, note very interestingly, physical crisis. When your vital actually reacts to something very, very violent, there is usually a trembling in the body. Okay, when people get angry, also you will see that many people, their body starts becoming, it starts trembling. Okay, so it's a physical reaction. He is so struck by this horrible deed that he has to do, he loses all courage and he loses all his determination, gone, and the body starts trembling. Okay, the Gita is very clear on it, and he throws down his Gandiva and says, "I will not fight." So the violent, sensational, and physical. It's not a thought. He is not thinking and saying, "No, this is wrong. I will not do." It's not. It's a physical reaction. Okay, which produces a disgust of the action as material objects of life. He rejects the vital aim pursued by egoistic humanity in its action. And what is the vital aim? Happiness and enjoyment. Everybody wants happiness and enjoyment. That's a vital aim of life in general humanity. He rejects the vital aim even of the Kshatriya, okay? Because Kshatriya has to fight, it's his duty to fight, okay? By the way, it reminds me, I'll tell you something interesting. It's a little side story, but still, in the Indian Army, one of the best trained in the world, the Indian Army, okay? And it is not like that in other countries. In fact, in America, they employ professional soldiers because they don't get enough people to do that. They're called mercenaries. Okay, and in Britain they have to employ Indians during the war. Okay, but in India these soldiers are trained. Fantastic training is there, and they are given even. You have to fight for your country and stand up for your country. Okay, these are the values given to you. Don't care for your life. Many classes are held in the Indian Army. That's why it's considered one of the best trained armies in the world. Okay, and that is the reason why recently, when in Galwan, okay, their captain of a particular group was attacked by the Chinese. The soldiers didn't care for their life. They were ordinary soldiers. They went and finished off the Chinese. Okay, so it's the this is the Kshatriya, the victory and rule and power. This is what you have to do. In other countries, it's not like that. In fact, it's a well-known fact now in China. The Chinese people are not trained for that. They are not trained, and that's why the Chinese have become frightened. And they are. I'm going a little out of the subject, but it's interesting to note all these things. They actually are putting robot soldiers on the border, not human beings, because the human beings won't fight properly. Okay. So they inflicted a tremendous thing in Galwan Valley. 20 soldiers, Indian soldiers died, but they died more than 40, 50. One account says even 100, but the Chinese won't admit. Okay. I've gone a little out of the way, but this is the training that a Kshatriya should get. Okay. So, victory and rule and power and government of men. Now, he is thinking, I have to kill all these people. What, after all, is this fight for justice when reduced to its practical terms? But just this, a fight for the interests of himself, his brothers, and his party, for possession and enjoyment and rule? Is that only what this war is all about? To just promote my own interests? He is thinking. Okay? But at such a cost, these things are not worth having, for they are of no value in themselves, but only as a means to the right maintenance of social and national life, and it is in these very aims that in the person of his kin and his race he is about to destroy. You have to maintain yourself and your family, and now you are going to destroy your own family. And then comes the cry of the emotions. Okay. Now note again, emotions, not thoughts. Okay. These are they for whose sake life and happiness are desired. It's for the family that one works and tries to get enjoyment for the family and your relatives. Our own people, the own swajana, okay, the word used in the Gita, swajana, your own people. So they put in double quotes. Okay, so who would consent to slay these for the sake of all the earth? He says, let alone even the kingdoms of the three worlds, but even I will not even fight for the kingdom of the three worlds. Why should I fight for a kingdom on earth? Okay. What pleasure can there be in life? What happiness? What satisfaction in oneself after such a deed? It will be a bloodied enjoyment. It will be a enjoyment covered with blood. That's what you use in the Gita. Okay. Blood-stained enjoyments. The whole thing is a dreadful sin, for now the moral sense awakens to justice to justify the revolt of the sensational slaughter. Now, after the emotional outburst, the moral idea comes in. The mind in its limited way. The morality is a product of the mind. So he is now coming to the mind. And there also he is justifying his vital. Now that's also interesting because we are all the time justifying our vital desires. So here he is vitally saying, don't fight. Okay, it's a vital reaction. And now his mind is supporting it. Okay. So this is what Shirdi say. The whole thing is a dreadful sin. For now the moral sense awakens to justify the revolt of the sensations and the emotions. The mind is supporting the vital. It's a sin. There is no right nor justice in mutual slaughter. Especially are those who are to be slain the natural objects of reverence and of love. They are my own gurus. Okay, Dronacharya is my guru. How can I kill him? Those without whom one would not care to live. And to violate these sacred feelings can be no virtue, can be nothing but a heinous crime, heinous crime, heinous crime. I don't know exactly how to pronounce it. Anyway, heinous crime. Horrible, very, very sinful, heinous crime. So that's what it is. Then, granted that the offense, the aggression, the first sin, the crimes of greed and selfish passion, which have brought things to such a pass, came from the other side. It's true that the others are, they have started the fight, the other side. Yet, I will not. Now he says something very interesting. Yet, armed resistance to wrong under such circumstances would be itself a sin and crime worse than theirs because they are blinded by passion and unconscious of guilt, while on this side it would be with a clear sense of guilt that the sin would be committed. He's answering. He's saying it's true that the other people have started the fight, but they are doing it because they are blind and they are completely misguided by their vital. But if we fight back, it will be with a clear sense. I am going to commit a crime. I with a clear sense, so I should not do it. Okay. And for what? For the maintenance of family morality, of the social law and the law of the nation. These are the very standards that will be destroyed by the civil war. Okay. The Sanskrit is very interesting. Okay. It says, Swajanam Krishna Yuyutsam Samupasthitam Sidanti Mama Gatrani Mukham Cha Parishushiti. I am getting all my it's impossible for me to Vepathuscha Sharire Me Roma Harshasva Jayate. My hair is standing up with horripilation is happening on my body, goosebumps. Okay. Gandiva Sansrate Hastat Twak Twaksha Paridahyate. My skin also is burning. The Gandiva is falling down and my skin is also burning with sensations. I will not fight. Okay. So I will not fight. Na yotse, that's the word used. These are the very standards that will be destroyed by the civil war. The family itself now, further reasoning to support the vital. The family itself will be brought to the point of annihilation, corruption of morals, and loss of the purity of race will be engendered. Now this Gita's description of war is absolutely right, because whenever war comes, the soldier has a feeling that he has the right to do anything. Okay, and this is a very interesting thing. That's why in war, rape and violence occurs absolutely. Even ordinary men become like that. That is one of the problems in India also. We have a special action of the Gita in the northwest. Okay, and the soldiers, even Indian soldiers, have been doing a lot of wrong in the area, and now there is a huge outcry in India that the laws that operate in the northwest should be removed. The army should not get full rights to do whatever they want. That's exactly what Gita is mentioning here, and that's what happens in war. Okay, there are no controls at all over the vital. Do whatever you want, but win. Okay, so what will happen? Corruption of morals and loss of the purity of race will be engendered. The eternal laws of the race, the moral law of the family will be destroyed. Ruin of the race, the collapse of its high traditions, ethical degradation, and hell for the authors of such a crime. These are the only practical results possible for this monstrous civil strife. Therefore, cries Arjuna, casting down the divine bow and the inexhaustible quiver. The gods had given him a quiver. Quiver is the holder of arrows. It will never get exhausted. That also is an interesting detail. Okay? When you are in a divine condition, your consciousness, whatever energy you spend, you will get infinite energy. That's the interesting thing. When you are, even when the psyche comes forward, the amount of energy that you have for all action will stun others around you. Okay, it will be. This is what is there. And Sri Aurobindo, note interestingly how Sri Aurobindo used to sleep only, not even sleep. Mother also, she never slept. She never had a bed. She had only a couch. She used to lie down and rest the body. Rest, but the inner being is working all the time. Okay, Sri Aurobindo also, he used to work whole night answering letters, and from 6 to 8 in the morning he used to take rest. After 8 o'clock, bath and breakfast. Okay, so inexhaustible quiver. Okay, it's interesting if you look at it. Given to him by the gods for that tremendous hour. The divine bow, Gandiva, it's given to him by the gods. It is more for my welfare that the sons of Dhritarashtra, armed, they should have armed, should slay me unarmed and unresisting. I will not fight. Now this is very interesting. This is what also Gandhi also did. Okay, I will not fight. Let the others kill me. That was his point of view. Even if they kill me, can they kill my soul? So it doesn't matter if they kill me. Now this is his. Now I'm asking you an interesting question. Would Sri Aurobindo agree to this? He says he certainly would not, because he says that if you are attacked, You have the full right in the physical world to protect yourself. But you have to do it without hatred and without any enmity, sense of enmity. No hatred, but only a calm, quiet, you have to protect yourself. That would be the right action. But Gandhi said very clearly, and that's the reason why the satyagrahis used to go and get beaten and they never resisted. The police used to club their heads and club their bodies. Some of them used to even bleed, but nobody protested. So that is Arjuna's argument, that let them kill me, I don't care, but I won't commit such a sin. Okay, that's what he's saying. But it is not the real thing at all. You have the full right to protect yourself. Why should you let somebody club you? But your reaction should never be of anger and enmity. You have the right to protect yourself, that's all. It's very subtle. Okay, so there we are. And finally he says, I will not fight. Okay. So that's what he's saying. Okay. So very interesting with so many ideas, but his mind is now supporting his sensations and says, I will not fight. And he is, remember, okay, the description is very clear. His body is trembling, okay. His skin is burning with fever, okay. It's such a violent action, he can't, his vital is not capable of facing. Okay. So we have time. We can read one more para. It's not a very big. The character of this inner crisis. Archanati has read and Jasmine has read and Pallavi also has read. Who will read next? Suki, would you like to read?
Yes, I will read.
Go ahead.
The character of this inner crisis is therefore not the questioning of the thinker. It is not a recoil from the appearances of life and a turning of the eye inward in search of the truth of things, the real meaning of existence, and a solution or an escape from the dark riddle of the world. It is the sensational, emotional, and moral revolt of the man hitherto satisfied with action and its current standards, who finds himself cast by them into a hideous chaos where they are in violent conflict with each other and with themselves, and there is no moral standing ground left, nothing to lay hold of and walk by, no dharma. That for the soul of action in the mental being is the worst possible crisis, failure and overthrow. The revolt itself is the most elemental and simple possible. Sensationally, the elemental feeling of horror, pity, and disgust. Vitally, the loss of attraction and faith in the recognized and familiar objects of action and aims of life. Emotionally, the recoil of the ordinary feelings of social man, affection, reverence, desire for a common happiness, and satisfaction from a stern duty outraising them all. Morally, the elementary sense of sin and hell and rejection of blood-stained enjoyments. Practically, the sense that the standards of action have led to a result which destroys the practical aim of action. But the whole offshoot is that all-embracing inner bankruptcy, which Arjuna expresses when he says that his whole conscious being, not the thought alone, but heart and vital desires and all, are utterly bewildered and can find nowhere the Dharma, nowhere any valid law of action. For this alone he takes refuge as a disciple with Krishna. Give me, he practically asks, that which I have lost, a true law, a clear rule of action, a path by which I can again confidently walk. He does not ask for the secret of life or of the world, the meaning and purpose of it all, but for a dharma.
There you are. So a little more discussion on dharma. And last sentence is very interesting. He is not asking for the secret of life and the world, but he is asking for a rule of law in the physical world. Okay, that's all. I am confused, and what should I do? I am a Kshatriya, and my values are all Kshatriya Dharma. But now the Kshatriya Dharma itself I am unable to accept. How can I kill my own people? Not possible. So, what do I do? So, give me a standard for action in the physical world. he's still continuing to be a physical man. Okay, so I think it's 8:32. We've got only 3 minutes left, but so we'll redo this one next time. But just a discussion on dharma. Same has put a very clear note. Okay, because dharma is a word which there is no equivalent word in English or other languages. I don't know, but in English it's certainly not there. But in Sanskrit it is a very wide meaning. Okay, it as I told you, it comes from the root dhri, to hold. So let's read the footnote. Dharma means literally that which one lays hold of and which holds things together. The law, the norm, the rule of nature, action and life. Okay? Here, this is, and the action, rule of nature, action and life. Your nature goes on changing at every level. When you are at physical level, there is a dharma. When you are at a vital level, there is a dharma. When you are at a mental level, there is a dharma. When you are in the spiritual field also, there is dharma. But the dharma goes on changing. The standards, the values go on changing from level to level. So you have to be faithful to that level. And Arjuna was very faithful to the Kshatriya level. He was holding the dharma. But now that dharma himself he can't accept. How can I do this horrible thing? This is the problem. And he says, give me a standard of action in the physical world. Okay, so that's still, the last sentence also tells you very clearly that he is not thinking, he is not a thinker, or he is not a spiritual person. He is not even thinking. What is the secret of life? What is the meaning of life? He is not asking. He is only asking for a law of action in the physical world. Okay? Very interesting. That's why Srimad, this is on the Gita, is fantastic. And this whole paragraph is the nature of the revolt. What is the nature of the revolt? It is sensational, and Srimad is giving very, very clearly. We'll do that next time. There is not enough time. There is only 1 minute left. He is discussing sensationally what it means, vitally what it means, emotionally what it means, morally what it means, and practically what it means. So, the nature of the revolt. What is the revolt coming from? Okay. Sensational, emotional, and moral. Okay, we stop here today.
Sramada.
Yeah, so this time it says
Merci beaucoup.
okay.
Merci Rangada. Bonne journée.
Bonne journée, and yeah, au revoir everybody. Have a nice day. Okay.
Thank you, Rangada.